Good afternoon and welcome to our April Tech Connect. I'm here today with Chris Bowers to talk to you about a number of different technology topics. Today I'm going to be chatting with you about 4 different factors of fair use, so a little bit of copyright chat today. And I'll also be talking about webinars and my 3 favorite places to Sorry, I got distracted. My 3 favorite places to go to look for webinars for some personalized and timely PD. And then Chris will be taking care of our chat today in our live chat window, and also handling some Q&A at the end of the discussion.
Afternoon, everyone.
If you are with us live today, please feel free to jump in and ask any questions as we go through our topics. To the right of the video, you'll see a chat window, and we'll get those questions in live time and make sure to get them all answered for you today. All right, jumping into fair use. Fair use allows the public to use copyrighted materials for teaching, reporting, parody, research, and criticism without asking for permission, but only if we follow certain guidelines. Fair use is an exception to copyright law. The flexibility of this exception, however, can leave us feeling sort of unclear about whether or not something actually qualifies as fair use. For the sake of this discussion on copyright and fair use today, I'm going to just be providing a brief overview of fair use. This by no means is a comprehensive discussion because copyright is a huge topic. And like I mentioned before, it's flexible and it has to be taken on a case-by-case basis. Copyright has always been important. It's nowhere near a new topic, but in education, it's even more important than it has been before, because as educators in the district and across the country move towards using digital content, we have to be more aware of the content that we're putting out there online and if we're using things in our classroom appropriately. Educators everywhere are in need of support when it comes to approaching copyright in the classroom. The first point I want to make is that educational uses of copyrighted material, it does not guarantee that we have the right to use, copy, or distribute work. We sort of, in education, throw around what is referred to as the fair use excuse. So we assume that we are covered because we are educators. That's not true. We have to really consider each instance on a case-by-case basis. We can't assume that we can use something that's copyrighted freely in our classroom just because we are using it for quote-unquote educational purposes. The general purpose of fair use is to find that balance between the copyright holders and the public, but we still have to work within some guidelines. And so that's where the 4 factors of fair use come in. The first factor is the purpose and the character of how we are using copyrighted material. There is a huge misconception here, and the mistake that we make is thinking that, again, because we're educators, we can use copyrighted content how we want to and claim we're using it for educational purposes. We have to stop and think about how we are actually using that content. The use of copyrighted material is going to be found as fair use more likely if we're using the content for actual instruction. In addition, transformative work, so altering something to give it a new meaning or a new message, is more likely to be found as fair use. We can't, for example, if we have a teacher website and we want to use a picture on our website, we can't say that this is an example of fair use because that has nothing to do with instruction. It doesn't impact instruction, so we would not be able to cite fair use as a way to make sure we are not in violation of copyright. The second factor of fair use is the nature of the copyrighted work itself. Factual work, so news and articles, that's more likely to be considered fair use if you're using that stuff in your classroom. Copyright itself is designed to protect works of creative expression. So the more creative the work is, the less likely fair use is to be found. However, that's extremely subjective. And like I mentioned before, transformative work is more likely to be considered fair use. The third factor of fair use is the portion of the entire work, how much you are using of it. The misconception here is that there are some sort of like number systems to help us work within this factor. I've heard people say, I can use 10% of a book or a poem, or I can use 30 seconds of a song and cite fair use, but that's not true. I think that just comes from people trying to understand fair use, because sometimes the language can be pretty vague. But again, no numbers exist at all. It's all on a case-by-case basis. In general, using a small part of the work is better than using a large portion of the work, just because it's more likely to be found as fair use. We just have to do the best that we can and use our best judgment, because if you look through some of the cases, using an entire work has been considered fair use in some circumstances. And then on the other hand, using just a small paragraph has been found to not be considered fair use, because that paragraph that a teacher used was considered the heart of the creative work. So it's totally subjective. We just have to ask ourselves, what is the smallest amount I can use to achieve the instructional goal? For example, if I have a 5-page article that I want to use to discuss an author argument, and that article is 5 pages, but I only actually need 2 of those pages to meet my instructional goal, then it's safer for me to go ahead and use those 2 pages instead of using all 5. And the final factor of fair use is the effect on the value. So ask yourself if you using that content, if that can become a substitute for a potential sale. Would your use of the copyrighted work impact any of the potential revenue to the copyright holder? And as I mentioned before, the 4 factors of fair use have to be considered as part of, have to all be considered as part of that case-by-case basis. You can't just say, oh, okay, this is factual information, so it qualifies as fair use. You have to consider all 4 of the factors together. One factor on its own cannot determine an application of fair use. The U.S. Copyright Office says that the distinction between fair use and infringement may be unclear and not easily defined. There is no specific number of words, lines, or notes that may be safely taken without permission. And this is huge here. Acknowledging the source of a copyrighted material, it does not substitute for obtaining permission. A lot of people assume that they can use whatever they want as long as they give credit. That's not the case either. So the next conversation of this is to consider how to properly attribute the sources that you're using if you do first determine that the content can be used under fair use, or if the content is licensed for reuse, which is really a whole other copyright topic altogether. So my advice into tackling copyright in your classroom is to start with the use of images. Again, simply providing a link to the source does not give you permission to use anything you want. Using a Google Image Advanced Search to limit your results to items that can be reused or modified is one way to be sure that you have permission. In addition, searching for images directly within Google Docs, Drive, Drawings, etc., that will automatically adjust those permissions to make sure that the images you're using in your presentations or your docs, that you have the right to use those images. And that is instruction that anytime I'm in a classroom and I'm working with students, I show them that trick so that they're not just hopping on Google Images and using things that they shouldn't be using. Other open source sites such as Creative Commons will provide you with images that are licensed appropriately as well. And the basic rule to attribute sources is to provide 4 things: the title, the source, the author, and the license if the work is licensed. This whole copyright conversation is part of a much longer conversation that we are looking forward to having within the next year as we move forward with coaching and with the curriculum work. If you do have a question specific to something you're trying to use in your classroom, feel free to email me to ask, hey, is this okay to use? Does this qualify as fair use? And if so, what's the best way to attribute this source? All right, the next topic is on webinars. So webinars for live or on-demand learning. A webinar is a virtual seminar, basically, and it's one way to get in some time-efficient and personalized PD. Depending on the platform the presenter is using to provide the webinar, you can be an active participant or a passive participant, or you can even watch the recording of the video, the webinar at a later date, which is pretty much what we do with our Tech Connect live streams. Webinars are convenient because you get to determine the schedule unless you want to watch live. They're timely and current, and many platforms provide you with a ton of topics to choose from. So my 3 favorite places to look for webinars for myself and for EdTech in general are listed here, and I'll go through what each one of them offers. The first is the Office of eLearning hosts what they call the eLearning Lab. And these webinars, I'll show you in a second, can be found on their YouTube channel. What I like about these webinars is that the topics are specific to what's happening in our state. A couple of examples of webinars from the eLearning Lab that I've enjoyed include technology and reading instruction and crash into digital content with Crash Course, if you are a John Green fan. So let me show you what that looks like. So on the DOE webpage, on the Office of eLearning, you'll see the eLearning Lab as part of their professional development. And then there's a link here to the YouTube playlist. If you search for eLearning Lab inside of YouTube, you'll find this playlist. And this is updated as the DOE Office of eLearning provides webinars each month. The second place to find webinars, this is bigger than just EdTech, is edweb.net. Let me go here for you. This is EdWeb. It's a learning network for teachers. It has tons of webinars available. You can browse upcoming webinars to watch live. I've signed up to get email notifications, and so I just let those come to me in my email, and if I see something that sounds interesting, I sign up for it. If I can make it to watch it live, I do. If I can't make it, then I'll watch the recording later. I also like to play these almost as podcasts, like in the background if I'm working on something else, and then if I hear something that piques my interest, I can hop on and pay closer attention. See, so on EdWeb, I think you have to be logged in, but you can see the calendar of upcoming webinars. Down here, you can get a little glimpse of that. And then you can also search through their archives. What's also cool about EdWeb is that after you finish a webinar, EdWeb will send you a certificate of completion that you can use to document PGP points. And this is completely free. And then finally, surprisingly, my 3rd favorite place to go to find webinars is actually GoGuardian. I love GoGuardian for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons I like them so much is that they truly are teacher-centered. They put a lot of effort into providing PD beyond just the product itself. They seem to be very much in line with current educational topics, and they partner with names that we'll notice, such as Todd Nesloney and Adam Welcome. They are the authors of the book Kids Deserve It. They also partner with Google to put on different PD sessions and webinars, which the last one they did with Google was awesome. I got to participate in that one live. So if you hop onto goguardian.com/live, you can subscribe to the different webinars that they have. And then if you also check out the GoGuardian blog, it's not necessarily webinars, but a lot of the blog posts that they share are pretty helpful as well. All right, so that is the end of our topics for today. If anyone has any questions for Chris or for me, doesn't look like we have any live questions. So if you happen to watch the video later on, please feel free to send either one of us an email about fair use or webinars. If there's a webinar that you are looking for on a topic and you can't locate it on the 3 sites I suggested, just shoot me an email and I'll help you find something that would be a good fit. All right, that's all we have for April's Tech Connect. Thanks for joining/watching, and we will check back in with you guys in May. Have a good one.